This is a GCSE AQA chemistry question. It's from the Trilogy 2019 paper, and it is a foundation question. There's elements of rates of reaction and energetics in here. So let's take a look at each section for you to try before we review. Here is part A, parts B and C, part D, part E, and finally part F, a total of 8 marks available. So in the first instance, we have got to tick which one is percentage by mass of calcium in the Earth's crust. It is simply reading the graph. And we can see that it's at 3.5. I'm also going to jump across to part B, which asks you to add magnesium with the 2.1% percentage by mass. So we can see the 3.5 and we can see the 2.1 just here. Going back to the question, we've got part C. Copper sulfate is produced during the extraction of copper. There's a lot of information here, and I'm going to use colour coding to help highlight how we're going to do it. So from the equation, we've got copper sulfate and iron making iron sulfate and copper. We know how much copper sulfate we started with, and we know how much iron sulfate and copper we ended up with. To find out the mass of iron needed, we need to remember the law of conservation of mass. The total mass of reactants is equal to the total mass of products. That allows me to take this data and say 648 plus X is 617 plus 258. I can rearrange that to make X the subject. X is 227 kilograms. On to part D. How do we show the activation energy? Well, the activation energy has to start at the height of the energy of reactants, and it has to go to the top of the peak. So I've used an arrow, I've done it very clearly, I've done it very carefully, and that shows the activation energy. And then we're asked to show what would happen if we added a catalyst. Now, a catalyst speeds up the rate of reaction. It does that by lowering the activation energy. So you've got to draw, starting at the same reactants, ending at the same products, a peak that is lower than the non-catalyzed version. And finally, what do we call catalysts in biological systems? This is a factual recall. It's learning keywords and definitions. We're looking for enzyme, and that takes us to the end of the question.